We went to Australia for 5 months. How did we afford it and what were the numbers? If you're a numbers person and you want to go to Australia, this is the video for you. Who are we?
We are Chris and Steve, Eat, Walk, Learn. Been in Australia for 5 months, and whether you're coming to Australia or you're traveling anywhere, we've got some great travel tips for you. If you want to follow us in real time,
so we post on Instagram almost every day, real-time location about what we're doing. We usually do a story or a reel about where we are. If you want to follow along in a discussion about Nomad life and so on, join us on our Nomad Life Facebook page. And if you want some tips about destinations and things to go, come to our webpage and go to the destination section and you'll see 65 countries and all 50 states and all kinds of suggestions on things to do. So keep up with us on social media, but let's first say hi to our kookaburra and our koala. We're still in Australia and we're going to tell you where we went and give you an itinerary so you understand where those expenses came from. So what did we do?
Right. Well, so back up a little bit. So we were in Australia for 5 months. We got here in November and we left in the beginning of April. And the reason that we did that is really for weather reasons. You know, we wanted to be here when the weather was nice, and since it's opposite of the northern hemisphere, summertime is in the winter months. It's so confusing. Is it winter here or is it summer here? Well, it's summer here. And particularly we started Brisbane from the Great Barrier Reef area and we worked our way south. We don't like jumping around a lot. So this was just a way for us to make the most sense of our itinerary and also to make the most sense of getting the best weather.
Yeah, and so we try to stay in 72 degrees or 22 degrees Celsius. And so when we arrived in Sydney, we cruised into Sydney. From Sydney, we went up to Brisbane and stayed there for about a month. And then we went to Heron Island to enjoy the Great Barrier Reef. Then we did some time in Hervey Bay, and then came down to Sydney for New Year's Eve. Enjoyed Sydney for about a month, and then we went to Auckland, New Zealand, and then we went back to New Zealand on a I think it was 11 or 12 day cruise or 13-day cruise. We'll tell you why we went to New Zealand twice. Then we went from New Zealand to Tasmania, from Tasmania to Torquay Beach, which is on the Melbourne beaches. Enjoyed the beach for another 3 or 4 weeks or so. Went to Uluru, enjoyed Uluru, came back to Ocean Grove, back on the Melbourne beaches, and then ended up back in Sydney. So I got to mention that while we were in Sydney, we did a little couple day trip out to the Blue Mountains. So we did all the highlights of Eastern and Central Australia. Absolutely loved it and can't believe how much we spent.
This is a relatively expensive country. Well, wait, let me check that. This is an expensive country.
It is.
And one of the things that is really expensive are the housing costs. And so our strategy was to do house sits. And if you want to hear more about our house sits, we've got a video right here that you can find out about house sitting. And then in between the house sits, we did some crazy excursions and did things like go to the Great Barrier Reef or go to the Uluru or go to Tasmania.
Right.
So these were some really fun breakaways. But certainly while we were in the particular locations like Sydney for over a month, there's a lot to do in Sydney.
Right.
And so we were really able to enjoy the city and as a slow traveler, but also do some of the things that maybe fast travelers do with our excursions.
Yeah, I think the point you're trying to make is when you house sit, you kind of have to take care of the pets and be responsible for the pets. And it keeps you from being able to do overnight trips or whatever. So we very strategically planned our 5 months in a way that we would do 3 or 4 weeks of house sitting. Then we would do an excursion or an adventure, and then 3 or 4 weeks of house sitting, and then another adventure. Because these adventures were places that you had to go to, spend time, and then come back. It wasn't like we could include those in some grand tour of the country. So that was our strategy for how we got around. But we did kind of, well, did we talk about our visas? Do you want to talk about visas?
We haven't talked about the visas yet.
Yeah, so just to set up, in order for Americans, and this is I'm sure it's similar for other countries, but for American citizens from the U.S., you must get a visa in order to go to both New Zealand and Australia. They both have the same type of visa. In Australia, it's called the 601. And both visas for Australia and New Zealand, they're individual visas. They're both good for a year, and they have 3-month exit strategies on them. So every 3 months, you have to leave the country, and then you can come back. They have multiple entries within the year. So for us, we started in Australia, we hit our 90-day or 3 months, then we had to leave. And so we left to go to New Zealand.
So Chris, why did we go to New Zealand twice?
Well, in order to satisfy the visa requirements of Australian visa, we had to leave at 3 months after we arrived. Well, we had booked this cruise to New Zealand previously with the understanding that cruise would count as our way to exit. When we got to Australia and quadruple verified that information after we had triple verified it previously, we found out that was not going to work, that Australia considers a closed circuit cruise, one that goes from Sydney around and back to Sydney, as you never got off the boat. And even though you do, they don't count it as you left the country. So we had to squeeze in a little weekend trip to Auckland because Auckland is the cheapest place to go to get out of Australia. So we squeezed into a 4-day trip to Auckland. It was actually really fun because we saw some friends. And
it was a lot of fun. And I got to do one of the epic hikes of all time on the Tongariro crossings in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Just a fabulous day of hiking in the most incredible place that I think I've ever been to.
Yeah, so we zipped over, did our Auckland trip, and came back and got on the ship and went exactly back to Auckland. But the first trip counted as our exit run, but the second trip did not. So anyway, it was an expensive error.
It was great.
Yeah, but it was all right. It all worked out fine.
Yeah,
so anyway, what we're going to talk about now is the 6 or 7 excursions that we did and what those cost, and then we'll talk about the combined all the costs together for our 5 months in the entire country.
Yeah, let's do that. So after our first house sit, we did a little side trip up to the Great Barrier Reef, and we went to Heron Island. We have a video on that if you want to see more about that. But the total for that particular side trip was $1,350.
Yep.
Then we did a camper van, which was a lot of fun, from Brisbane to Sydney. The nice thing about that, it was relocation, and we'll tell you about that if you want to know more about that.
In the video up here.
But we had a total of $120 on that one. That was like super cheap way to rent a camper van and travel down the coast.
For a 4-day road trip down the coast for $120.
Beautiful.
Then we one of the main reasons why we even came to Australia was we wanted to do New Year's Eve and do the fireworks on Australia. That was a total splurge for us. Our friends came. We saw the best fireworks show ever in the world, and that night cost us $300. And these are in U.S. dollars, by the way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So Chris was just talking about our quick little visa trip over to Auckland, to New Zealand. That total was about $650.
Yep. And then we came back and cruised back to Auckland, and that was $1,530 for the cruise.
Yeah, that was a 13-day cruise, and it was great, and I loved going to New Zealand, so I wouldn't have changed that, even if it didn't fit exactly what we wanted.
And we got to hit 5 or 6 ports on the North and South Island, so it was a great way to get a little appetizer taste of New Zealand.
Yeah.
Then from New Zealand, we flew straight to Tasmania. And how much was Tasmania?
Yeah, so Tasmania, the total week in Tasmania was $1,300 all in.
Right, and then from Tasmania, we went to Ocean Grove or to Torquay Beach, and from there we went to Uluru and spent 5 days in Uluru. And by the way, all these we've got videos up here on the different excursions. So 5 days in Uluru was $1,400.
Yeah.
And actually $1,400, and we used some hotel points.
We did use some hotel points, so if you wanted to actually figure out like what's an all-in cost, it was a little bit over $2,000 if you wanted to replicate what we did without using hotel points.
With the value of the hotel points.
Yeah.
So our total excursion cost, so we call these excursions, splurges, if you will, or vacations from our life, was $6,650. So I think that's a pretty good number. We
had some amazing adventures, and I can't think of anything that we didn't do in New Zealand or in Australia.
Right, Heron Island and the Blue Mountains and Tasmania and New Zealand and Uluru and the beaches of Melbourne.
Amazing.
And it was the richest experience-filled 5 months I think we've had in this whole strategy of 3 or 4 weeks at a house sit and then a vacation and 3 or 4 weeks at a house sit. I think it really worked well.
Yeah, and this is an amazing country, and the people are fantastic, and just loved every minute of it. Can't wait to come back. But let's finish up here by talking about what were our total expenses for the 5 months. We told you about just our little excursion and adventures that we took. But what do we totally spent? And we broke this down by category because that's how we do our budget, is by individual category. So first up, we'll just talk about our travel category. This is the planes, trains, boats, and anything.
Transit.
It's any kind of transit that moves. We spent over the 5 months just under $5,000 on a budget of $4,265. So we went over by about $600, which is about 15% over. And just considering some of the amazing things that we did and places that we went, I'm actually surprised.
And where does that budget come from? How much should we budget for the whole trip? We budget $4,333 a month,
right,
every month for our Nomad life. So we have a $52,000 a year budget. Since we were in Australia for 5 months, $433.33 times 5 is what our budget was for the 5 months that we were in.
Yeah, and if you break that down and we break it down by category, then we just divide it by 12. So this wasn't specifically an Australia budget. This is a budget on our entire year and how much do we spend in Australia versus that average monthly or 5 month budget.
Right, and if you want to see our budget for the year, our fiscal year ends May 31st. So come on around at the end of May, 1st of June, and we'll do a whole roundup of our 3rd year traveling of our full-time travel.
Yeah.
Okay, the next category was shopping. Ooh, my favorite category. We spent $1,689. We're just over budget by 13%. This includes clothes and shoes and a backpack and just the things we need that we don't eat, basically. Right. Things that we need that we don't eat.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Next up was housing.
Yeah, housing is the big one. That's where we would expect to spend the most money, and we actually spent $2,220.
Wait a minute. How did we spend $2,200 on 5 months in one of the most expensive countries to stay in? How did we do that?
How is that possible? Well, that's house sitting, and that's the beauty of house sits, is that the amount of money that we spent was really on, our little side trips that we took and hotels, which some of those we did on hotel points. And portions of the cruise that we allocate to housing.
Yeah, because on a cruise we do a third on housing, a third on transportation, a third on entertainment. Yeah. That's how we break down a cruise budget.
But this is the big one. I mean, so we spent a little over $2,000 on a budget of $6,000 because we allocate. Well, actually, we say $2,000 a month, but that's average. Anyways, in total, we were 63% under budget.
And we got to meet Bonnie and Dusty and Albie and all the fun pets and Luna and all the fun pets that we got
to get to know over the time.
Health and wellness, we spent $1,590. This is 21% under budget, and this is basically massages, medical or travel insurance,
right?
And that's basically what that was.
Exactly.
Food.
Yeah, food. So we'll do total, and then we'll talk about it individually because we break this down into groceries and also eating out. So total food, we spent $4,600. This was on a budget of $5,500. So we spent about $900 less than what our budget would have been, about 16%. And this really varies by groceries versus eating in restaurants and eating out. And groceries, we actually went over our budget. So not only this is also an indication we did a lot of house sits, we did a lot of cooking at home more than usual, but also the groceries are expensive here in Australia. This is not an inexpensive country to buy.
For example, some grocery apples are cheap. Apples are really good here, by the way. Lots of really good apples here. But bananas run about $1 a banana, and I'm used to paying like 25 cents a banana around the world, generally, more or less. So $1 a banana. If we went out maybe for lunch, just the two of us to get a sandwich, it would be probably $50 Australian, so easily $35 for just 2 sandwiches, not even drinks, just 2 sandwiches. So
and that's our food and drink budget. So just generally eating out, we spend a little bit over $3,000 on a budget of $4,500. So we didn't spend as much as our budget on eating out, and I think there's just a lot of times we just weren't getting the value out of that. So we looked at some ways to cut our costs there because, again, Australia.
But it was nice. We didn't have to tip, and there was no tax. So, I mean, that was nice. So we saved ourselves 20% on tipping. But it still was just like, God, to go out and get eggs and toast, it was $12. And it was just that, it just didn't feel like, so we ate a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Entertainment. If you follow our budgets for over the years, you've seen that we have intentionally tried to raise our entertainment budget to force us to spend money to go out and do entertaining things besides the things that we like to do, like hiking and drawing and all the things that we do that generally don't cost money. So we spent a budget of $1,676, which is 12% over budget. We actually spent more money on entertainment.
We spent more money on entertainment. We've been able to enjoy some great things, and this includes some of the things like going scuba diving or snorkeling, or we went to the comedy festival. Really enjoying
took some tours that we normally wouldn't have paid for. Yeah,
enjoyed doing some of the great things here in Australia. They cost some money. That's okay.
Yeah. Bills and utilities, $610 for the month for the time, and we were 32% under. And this is really just our cell phones and our mail service. So if you want to know anything about domiciling and mail services, as a full-time nomad, you can watch our video. If you want to know how to set up your phone and what kind of cell phones and SIM cards we use, you can watch our want most watched video, this one right here, about how to set up your cell phone. So our grand total. Ready? You want to say it or you want me to?
I'll say it.
Okay.
We spent a grand total of $17,304. This was on a budget of $21,665. So we came in $4,361 under budget. To spent 20% less than what our budget calls for. So I think
high five, buddy.
We enjoyed Australia for 5 months under 20% under budget.
Yeah, so really feel like, and what I find interesting is our excursion budget was 38% of our total budget. So I see that as 38% of our time we were on vacation, enjoying vacation stuff.
Right.
And that was only $6,600. So I think being in Australia for less than 20 grand for 5 months is unbelievable, and especially we didn't miss a single thing, not a single thing. We did everything we wanted to do. We did it at the level of expenditure that we wanted to do it in. I mean, we ate meat pies, we had Vegemite, we had Joffles, we had all the foods, and we love Australia and can't wait to come back. We hope you will love Australia too, right? Mic drop. If you have any questions, please ask us. If you have any questions about the numbers, we went through them very quickly. We're glad to separate out or break out anything that didn't make sense. And we're now leaving Australia and going, where are we going?
Where are we going?
You'll find out in the next video. Talk to you soon.